What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Site Visit. It's been a couple weeks, so I wanted to update you guys on what we have going on. We are in our back bay project, and last week I actually spent the day getting this place cleaned out. I had the guys over at Bernardo Corp come in. They helped me get all the floor protection taken up. I think there was like 4 layers of it. All of the protection taken out of here, basically uncovering the floors which were installed, if you guys can remember, way back before we even plastered this place. So for us, it was a big unveiling. But we also removed a lot of the protection on the glass. We removed a lot of the protection on some of the millwork and cabinetry, and we got rid of a lot of trash and material that we just no longer needed. Why are we doing that when the floors aren't done? Well, and I'm gonna also talk about cleaning, but we are going into our finishes and our floor finish. Now our floor finish, you can actually see the very first, I think this might have one more coat to do, but you can see raw white oak here, and this is actually the finished floor down here. We finished the kitchen floor prior to the cabinetry going in, so it was all protected underneath all the millwork and cabinetry. You can see a nice variation between the two, so you're getting a little bit more of a whitewashed look on the floors. The floors are a 7-inch white oak from Carlisle Floors. Fantastic looking floor. Really exciting to get into the finishes. So going back, we removed all the protection. Now it's always nerve-wracking to do that because number one, the paint is like 90% complete, meaning that we leave that last 10% for touch-ups, especially since we're finishing the floor last. We're going to want to go around and touch up all the baseboards, but the painters did an absolutely great job here. After plaster, we had spent months here plastering. Everything is dialed in, perfectly flat, level plumb. Flat is actually probably the best way to describe it. We can literally take straight edges from corner to corner and have no, if any, very, very little discrepancy. I'm talking like paper thin. So the plaster was really set the painters up for success. But beyond the plaster, obviously we're talking about flat surfaces, everything blending in. We've already talked about, all of the plastered in fixtures. Behind me right here, listen to this. Normal wall, that's a speaker. So stuff like that, there's plastered in speakers, there's plastered in devices. I know you guys are gonna ask, that's from Stealth Acoustics. But all of these surfaces have to be really flat because we're in a really modern, contemporary home. So the surfaces, no matter what, have to be flat. We have to start with a good surface before we paint. So getting into paint. Paint, basically we start, and on top of the floor protection that was already installed, they go around obviously protecting as much of the floor all the way up to the baseboard. And they're gonna start by going through and getting everything primed. Everything got primed in one shot. And then from there, you start using your inspection lights. The guys had some halogen lights behind them. We also had the Festool inspection light. And that's when you start walking the surfaces and making these micro repairs to the surfaces, whether something got scratched, whether you have a trowel mark, whether you have a little dust in the primer, whatever it was, you basically go through and work and work and work and work that surface until you're getting it to a really great, flat, imperfection-free surface ready for paint. We had our client come in. They did an inspection with me after primer, and they also did one right before final coat of paint. And I mean, we were in here scanning every inch of this place with the light, making sure that inside corners were really sharp. There's still some areas that we'll adjust, but we'll deal with that on the touch-up. But it was really important. The client had made very clear from the beginning. I think he's got some family that are in auto body. And while we're not dealing with sheet metal, they were looking for near sheet metal perfection, which is why we use that inspection light and walk through this place. After the paint, we pull all the protection, and then I brought the cleaners in. Now, the cleaners came in, they did a once over. All the surfaces have been wiped down, dust has been picked up. Obviously, we're gonna start dealing with dust on the floor, but I wanted the cleaners to get in and get a first pass of this to get all of the residual dust, out of this place. We wanted to make sure that anything that was underneath these floors was vacked up, cleaned up, and prepped. So when the floor guy comes in, we can start finishing the floor and we're not moving stuff or ripping up stuff and so on and so forth. Obviously, with that being finished, we're gonna get some floor protection down rather than Rambour. We'll probably use something like an Econo Runner where it's a little bit softer, but it also allows us to start installing fixtures and finishes. One of the things with the AV is that you can't have any dust in the place when you start installing these devices. So we want to make sure we're cleaned up. So we'll go into the floors, and then and we'll also go into our devices and things like that. I'm going to get to the countertop in a future episode or a future conversation. A few of you guys have caught that on our Instagram Live, which we're doing once a week, and also just Instagram stories in general. There's an issue with it. We're addressing it. We'll come back to it. One thing for us, I've always talked about, is intentionality, and especially when it comes to separation of dissimilar materials. This right here is designed to look like a giant concrete cube, which I think, Van Gerven did a fantastic job doing that. It's a micro cement. It's actually a Devlime is the product. So there's base coats, basically similar to stucco, and then you have this micro cement topping that goes on the very last few coats. So let's start with the baseboard. We have an elevated reglet detail. It's about 4.5 inches off of the floor. So that bottom 4.5 inches is actually a piece of poplar that was scribed tight to our white oak flooring. Then you have this 1/2 inch reveal. If you guys want to see how we did that, there's a previous episode that we walk through that. But then when we get to the fireplace, it didn't make sense for us to continue that reveal all the way around. Because if this is a concrete cube, you would never have a quote unquote baseboard running around a concrete cube. Instead, we took that 1/2 inch and we've dropped it on the bottom of this fireplace. So this gives it a separation from the white oak. And that way it's up elevated. It still has this big massing, but it almost gives it a slightly lighter look to it. It also is really nice and gives you a nice crisp line, so you're working to a metal edge, giving you a nice crisp line rather than trying to scribe this to the floor, or vice versa, scribe the floor to the face of the concrete. I'm going to talk about the top in a moment, but here we also did the same. If you look back here, Doug, we actually have a 1/4 inch reveal, a shadow reveal. Same exact reason. We could have ran this all the way into the wall and then brought the wallboard to it, or we could have ran the wallboard and then ran the concrete to it. But the problem is now you're relying on the painter to give you a nice straight cut line. I'm not saying a painter can't do that, but what we've effectively accomplished, the guys at Van Gerven Plastering, by keeping this a 1/4 inch off, you're giving it a nice hard edge to paint to. So when you're looking at it, you always have a nice straight edge, and you really don't actually notice that there's a gap there until you're standing right up on top of it. But when you stand back, it's always going to give you that really, really nice straight intentional line, and it adds that level of shadow. Now up top, we're just over 1 inch up there. Same detail, same reasoning that we've done on the wall and the floor, but we've increased the gap up there to also utilize it for the heat release. This fireplace is gas. It does release heat through the top of the unit, and that gas goes, I'm sorry, not the gas, but the heat goes up the unit and then out the top and basically floods the ceiling and drops down into the room, creating warmth. But that by effectively keeping that down, we're doing the same thing by giving you a nice shadow line, a nice crisp line, and it's just an interesting detail. And again, it gives you this, this look of a big piece of concrete that was kind of stood up here against the wall, again, separating it from the dissimilar materials around it. I also want to call attention to, and I feel like maybe we'll dig into we're going to dig into all of these details in a future episode, but a couple things standing here. One of you guys had asked if we had painted our louver a different color. I think I had taken a photo from above looking down, and we did not. We actually sprayed them to match the wall, but the skylight above was actually shining on top of the sheet metal, so it was reflecting a little bit differently than the wall. But let's talk about this wall. This wall is absolutely critical. You have a giant skylight above, you have a lot of natural light, you have a lot of glass. This wall has to be dead flat. So this one got primed. I'm gonna go grab my inspection light. Be right back. Plug it in here. But the inspection light is important because it's going to shine things that you're never going to see. So if you're working with an inspection light, first off, how bright that is. So when you're doing that, when you're taking the light and just shining it on the wall like this, you're going to see some imperfections, especially if there's a gouge or a scratch, which I don't see anything here. And this is, you're going to catch pretty much anything that you would normally catch or that you would never normally see under, normal light conditions. But we took it one step further, and the light is designed, it's actually rubber on the side. If you take this light, put it on the wall, the wall looks great. But what it's doing is it's catching every little edge, all the way down to these tiny little micro, this micro texture. I'm not even sure what I would call that, but that's the nap from the roller, and we use a really tight roller. So it looks really, it actually looks fairly terrible like that, but if I pull this light off the wall, you actually don't see that anymore. And even like straight on like that, it's really hard to see because you're not catching the edge. So by effectively taking the light and catching the edge, it allows you to see imperfections throughout any of the, let me turn that off, any of the wall. It's a great tool. It's a dangerous tool, but we understood what the expectations were with the client here and the level that they were looking to achieve. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing everything we could to get a near perfect, and I don't use that word often, but a near perfect. And so for us, we're going to be getting into our finishes, basically our fixture install. We got the bathroom fixtures to install. We got a little bit of the millwork to wrap up. But in a future episode, we'll certainly walk you through all of the details, including this staircase that just looks absolutely epic. We still have our stainless steel handrails to go in. You see those brackets sticking out of the wall. And we'll dig into the floor finish and all the steps that it's going to take to get that really cool white oak finish. Stay tuned for a future episode of Site Visit when we visit all that stuff. Stay tuned for the next episode of Revealed, and make sure you're subscribed to the NS Builders podcast. We'll see you guys next week.